Hello and welcome everybody. PoorlyMade is a channel I created for me to explore content creation and try out new things that interest me. In today's video, we cover a video game series I thoroughly enjoy. Before I begin, here are some context and disclaimers. For newcomers or those who stumble upon this video, the Legend of Heroes Trails series is a series of fully interconnected games that currently consist of 11 localized English titles. It is commonly known as the One Piece of video games, or the Kiseki series in Japanese. This video will be covering the latest entry, The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak, and will contain spoilers for every game up to this point. You are advised to look away if you already have keen interest in playing the title and not looking for any sort of spoilers whatsoever. Now for the seasoned veterans, as the English titles are behind the Japanese release, I would like to emphasize to not bring any future knowledge into the discussion, and even if you do know the answers, please refrain from providing any input, especially information regarding the overarching narrative. That's it. Discussion on anything up to this game and speculations for the future are warmly welcome. Finally, this video is meant to be more of a deeper dive and for me to give my personal opinions on the game. This video is not sponsored by anyone. In the first couple of minutes, I will give some overall thoughts and keep it as spoiler free as possible. Thereafter, I'll dive into spoiler territory and cover topic by topic. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Now, my overall thoughts for the game. Trails Through Daybreak is a strong entry into the series. It has a particularly strong emphasis on trying to be different from the previous titles, which permeates throughout all aspects of the game. From a refreshed integration of action and dynamic turn-based combat, a newly updated and absolutely gorgeous visual art style, improved cinematography, to a story that explores darker themes on an unexplored territory in the Calvert Republic. All of which made from a brand new custom-made in-house game engine. It is rather obvious, especially to series veterans like myself, that Falcom, the developers of the series, is screaming, "I'm different and I dare to try new things." Overall, this game sets a good foundation for the future of the series and shows it's willing to change in big ways. That said, this is still a mammoth undertaking, and as the first entry with this many changes, it definitely has a fair share of problems and can feel rough around the edges at times. That said, I believe the developers have succeeded in demonstrating their intention and do have my hopes up for the upcoming titles and towards the end of the series. Although not technically released this year, the game is originally released late 2021, I can easily see it being regarded as a Game of the Year contender, or at least one of the best JRPGs released this year. Daybreak is marketed as a great entry point, and what I just mentioned about how everything is a renewed take on the norm kind of backs up this claim. Personally, I thoroughly enjoyed the journey, but it certainly isn't a particularly short one, nor is it very friendly with avoiding extremely important series spoilers. It took me roughly 130 hours to beat the game, but probably more like 70 hours for a standard playthrough. That is because I was playing on the hardest difficulty available, and I was doing more of a completionist run. If you absolutely must start with this game, because it calls to you in one way or another, whether it's the graphics, the characters, the voice actors, then please don't let me stop you from doing so. However, I would say that if you realize this series is something you truly want to sink your teeth in and enjoy, the best point to let go will be anywhere before chapter 3, as further down contain massive series spoilers and it's brought up more frequently than you can probably understand. In fact, I'm really curious for those who have finished the entirety of Trails through Daybreak as your first entry point into the series. How did you find it? Was there way too much towards the end? I personally can see how someone new will have tons of things spoiled and simultaneously have tons of plot points fly over their head without fully comprehending and appreciating what's going on. Trails in the Sky First Chapter, or FC, will always be the best starting point, and Cold Steel 1 is currently a close second. At the time of writing this script, a remake of the first game titled Trails in the Sky the First is in the works, aimed to release next year, and is certainly an option as well if you can afford the wait. Now, spoiler warning, with my overall thoughts out of the way, I'm going to now go into detail for each section with potentially full spoilers. The content shared up to this point is more or less fully scripted, as I want to be very careful with what I share to avoid spoiling as much as possible. From here on out, I'll be discussing different aspects of the game categorically, and I don't want to restrict myself in how I share them. Thus, it will be full-on spoilers only from here on out. Please click away now if you are concerned about any spoilers whatsoever. You have been warned, so let's get right into it. Now, for the next part, I'm gonna tackle one of the biggest changes in the game, which is combat. So for this section, there's not a proper script that I have. I just have a bunch of points laid out in front of me in a file right now, and I'm just going through them and explaining my thought process. Now, firstly, there's been a massive overhaul, and I think that's a nice change, right? I will split this section into different categories of combat, and we'll go deeper into the details, starting with field action combat. Now, firstly, I'll go through the positives. I think in the field action combat, it's a nice change of pace to deal with these smaller mobs instead of going into a battle menu constantly and dealing with them. It's pretty irritating previously, especially when you're dealing with insignificant monsters, right? I think in the field action combat, you have three kind of different abilities, right? You have the basic attack combo, your special attack, and of course also the dodge attack, right? That's it. You also be able to dodge, right? I think having a special attack that gives invulnerable frames is fantastic. It allows for more sophisticated gameplay where you can actually time your attacks so that you're invulnerable when the enemy is attacking you, and that makes you be heavily rewarded for timing your special attacks right. The perfect dodge mechanic, where when you dodge just right, that gives you full special meter, right? If successful, is also great, right? It helps enhance the gameplay and the action. And finally, I think unlike the E series, which is fully action heavy, the mechanic itself is simple, fun, and enjoyable, right? And achieves its objective in general. Finally, what I write here as a plus point is gaining CP this way is much more fun and way easier to set up as well than before, right? Trying to get everyone to 200 CP previously has been a massive problem. Yeah, and I think this kind of really helps alleviate and make things less complicated than it needs to be. Now, enemy. So moving to the negatives, right? I think enemy unblockable moves is the first one I want to talk about. It's either useless or too strong. The reason I say that is because usually when the enemy, either when they are stunned once or very near to being stunned, you'll be able to use an ability that is much stronger than their normal attack. However, this attack is extremely telegraphed with much more time than the normal, making it very easy to dodge. In general, this move cannot be dodged, right? So what I mean by dodge is you just have to move out of the way, yeah, which is generally very easy. Unless this is the counterpoint, which is that the way Falcom overcome this is they make some of the monsters have giant hitboxes, right? Like the giant fish, those giant crabs, right? And then their attack becomes nigh impossible to duck, right? So it just becomes too strong, right? And I think this is a problem with the few action combat. Yeah, I think the monsters needs to have a better approach to this, yeah, than what it has now. On the second point I have as a negative is higher difficulty damage is absolutely absurd. I don't know about you guys, but because I play on Nightmare, it's ridiculous how much damage they deal, even basic attacks. And I constantly need to go to the menu to heal my characters, and yeah, it's not fun because especially when you're fighting a bunch of mobs, right? Obviously they are weak alone, so they usually come in packs, and inevitably you'll get hit here and there, but it just takes so much damage. And I feel like that's the only thing that changed in changing difficulty, just the damage you take, and that is not very wise, right? Because I believe you can increase the difficulty in other ways, such as like having a bigger pack, having the monsters attack faster, right? Things like this. You don't need it to deal absurd amount of damage. Yeah. So yes, that's something I think Falcom needs to tackle, but it has more to do with difficulty, I suppose. Next is animation fluidity and animation recovery. So there are many playable characters in Daybreak, which is pretty amazing for a first game. But the thing is, during the field action combat phase where you get to control the characters, a lot of the characters has some animation fluidity issues, right? And I know that because I'm also an avid fan of the other flagship series, the E series, right? Where characters, they're stuck in their animations in this game, a lot of them, right? They'll just use a move and then they're stuck a lot, and it can feel very clunky at times. I would say the only exception, but the best case is probably Van, where he can actually just animation cancel a lot of his moves. Like you can see him in the middle of using his attacks, and you input a roll, right, a dodge, and it'll happen right away. Right, whereas there are other characters where whether it's using their charge abilities or after using their abilities, they recover for very long. So in this game, I was able to use Shizuna, and because of the faction I picked at chapter 5, and because of that, I still remember that there were times where I thought, why was my shards not activating? But it's just that she had an absurdly long animation recovery after a partial part of a combo. Yeah, so this made me realize, holy shit, it really sticks out. Like, yeah, things like this really kind of rough, and I hope they're able to help improve it. Of course, I know like Shizuna case, it might be intentional, because her attacks are very strong, but I think more characters can help to have that, the Van treatment, and improve their animations and recoveries. Yeah. And finally, the last point I put here is, at least for me, I have an over-reliance on the field battle mode, although it's not really meant to be how you should engage in combat in general. But I had a big reliance on it, as it was way more effective early on than turn-based combat. Turn-based combat felt like a slog. It was so difficult to kill the enemies, right? Whereas in this way, it's so much easier. I cannot emphasize that enough. Yeah, and that's why I run into this enemy unblockables and difficulty damage way more early on in the game. Yeah, so I think there needs to be a balance between the two. Yeah, and I hope they'll be able to improve it in the future games. Now, there are some points I indicated here. They are not neither here nor there, right? Not necessarily plus or minus, but some food for thought, I think, that is relevant for their section. So firstly, this few action combat, is presented from the get-go, and more or less, yeah, you learn one or two things, but it never really grown, right? Like by chapter 1, you know everything, yeah, and it's simple, but perhaps a bit disappointing that it's not explored a bit further, right? Which is the next point. Beyond just exploring in terms of adding more and more new mechanics, I also believe this section, this real-time section, could be used in story segments as well, and it could be very interesting because of how the way it works. I think it's something that shouldn't be overlooked, right? It's something that they have, and I would love to see how they are able to integrate this into various other elements to make it more interesting. Now, some hopes for the future. So this is something more like what I think about could really help pushing this part of the combat forward in the future. Firstly, I'm thinking about the SCLM, right? The new link system in few battles. Yeah, I have not played East 10, but this is really a callback to how character dynamics, where you can maybe use one character and somehow use the other character, or how when you strategically use this placement, they're able to use more combat abilities besides the standard. Of course, I also throw in here maybe have a button for arts, and this is maybe customizable depending on what hollow core or what quads is equipped, right? Again, as I mentioned before, the animation control, I really wish it'll be more responsive in general during this section. And finally, I think just having a little bit of alternative combo routes, right? Like I mentioned, I think it really helps spice things up, even if it's ultimately meant to be a additional fun factor, right, for the easier mobs. So that's for the view action combat. Next, I'll talk about the turn-based. So firstly, I just want to mention, they removed the death blow from the action time bar, and that is amazing. Oh, that's the best decision they probably had done. Yeah, death blow is just too swingy of a mechanic, and oftentimes it's just problematic, right? Because when I have it, it's only it only works against mobs that is usually not significant, and when the enemy has it's super problematic, especially with one of the negatives I'm going to talk about later on down the line. Now, the next positive I want to talk about is simplifying status effect efficacy. Yeah, I remember Cold Steel and Erebonia, with so many numbers here, numbers there. It's a little bit too much fluff, in my opinion. Right, going back to its roots, it's good. That said, I did not like the way the symbols convey their message. It's not exactly clear. Of course, after playing the whole game, yeah, it's clear to me now, but for a long time it's kind of a bit confusing. And yeah, so sure, stick to the symbols, but give it more clarity. Tell me what it exactly means. Another plus point is, finally being able to move during turn base is fantastic. This is something that everyone has been dying for, like being able to move around during your turn. Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of us been really wanted to do. Right? Previously, those are two different commands, and now they're merged into one, which just makes a lot more sense and gives a lot more strategy to the game. This is also, you know, boosted, right? Which is the next plus point for, you know, thinking about attacking from the side and attacking from the back, and you know how all these have multiplier effects. I guess one unfortunate thing is this is tied to the ability. I do like to think that maybe some of this mechanic can persist beyond the craft, right? Or yeah, beyond the craft, and actually rewards strategic placement. Yeah, or introduce, you know, more dynamic weaknesses that can be exploited, you know, when the opportunity presents itself. Yeah, so but yeah, overall I still like the fact that they introduced this side and back attack bonuses. And in fact, the new boost and SCLM mechanic, they really work together very well to provide more strategic and thoughtful gameplay, and really sets it apart. I remember when I first played the first prologue, there was so many things thrown at me, from the field to the turn base. I'm like, wow, this, like, if you don't tell me this is trails, I'll be I'll be damned. I'll be damned, right? Like, I wouldn't know it's trails too. There's so many changes, and honestly, fantastic. I love it. All this introduction to about careful placement really helps enhance the moment to moment, even in the turn-based mode. Yeah, it's never all that boring, you know. Yeah. Finally, I would say the nerf to arts is fantastic. I'll elaborate further down below, but yeah, arts is, I mean, it's almost nerfed to the ground, but and you know, it's still exploitable, but it's much harder, at least from my personal experience, than before. So shifting the emphasis to movement placement and all this, I like it. I like it a lot. Now, talking about the negative, I think the first one I have here is more controversial. Perhaps, yeah, I'm talking about the tank van, right? Being way too good. So, you know, our main protagonist Van, yeah, and his coin bullets, it's just too good in my opinion, right? Because he's a very good tank, and his solo core and boost and all that kind of complements that as well. And generally, you know, you just use the hate and pull in one side and have everyone else blast the characters distracted with trying to kill an unkillable Van. So I'm not saying this is a bad thing necessarily, but the fact that this strategy works almost everywhere is yeah, I think there's room to grow. I'm not saying not this to the ground, but you know, I think we need to have a balance where you really make us think a bit further than just prevailing with the most simple and straightforward strategy that's been around, you know, ever since. You know, there's a lot of, right, moving on from this also, there's a lot of added fluff with different buffs doing very similar things, but yeah, so remember we have like attack damage up, and then we also have like attack stat up. Like, it's a little bit confusing, and also because of the fact that there's multiple stages and abilities gives different stage increase, it's really unclear in the results, like what should I use, which is better, so many things to maintain, sometimes like very confusing, and it's pretty ambiguous, you know, like why do you have such extra things to confuse people. And then yeah, so the next point I will mention about the icons, you know, being rather unclear. I think just making sure these efficacy icons, instead of using your, I mean, yeah, you can still use a square, whatever, triangle, circle, X, but I think we need more elaboration. Yeah. You know, one of the biggest negatives I can say for the turn base is the removal of turn order manipulation using S-Break. This makes no sense. This makes no sense. Like, why? This is such a crucial and honestly special mechanic introduced since the first game, right? Since Trails in the Sky first chapter. It's always been around. And to me, it's kind of like a staple. Like, I mean, I understand you really want to change, but this is it really doesn't make a lot of sense why you know, you don't allow S-Break to manipulate. Yes, you still kind of manipulate, but you know, the main thing about S-Break is you're supposed to steal bonuses, right? But it doesn't do that anymore, which is tied to just now what I mentioned about AT Death Blow being in the action time bar. I think this might be a big reason why they did it as well, because if you're unable to steal death blows, you just did. You just did. Especially since there's so little death blow resistance in this game, or if any, I can't remember off my head. Yeah, so this one is really bad in my opinion. And then yeah, on that note as well, I never really got to understand how to maximize stealing buffs. Yeah, I know you can stun them when they have a buff and then they'll give you, but you know, more or less the stun meters has been, you know, fixed, right? It's not like cold steel, you can just stun them, boom, easily. Yes, even for like lousy mobs, it takes a while to stun them. So you know, and the turn order, they don't really show how many turns ahead. They only show like what, 2-3 turns ahead. It's not very useful, and it's often very hard to steal buffs, and I just steal buffs by accident more likely than not. And I don't know if that's the only way, right? Of course, it's fun when I have like double, triple critical, but that's not often the case. Next, the new AT bar is honestly got nothing on the old one. I don't know what the heck is the new AT bar. That thing is horrible on the top. Like I sometimes miss it. It's so small and sometimes forget to pay attention to it. Yeah, in fact I didn't. There was a point where I even forgot it existed. For quite a while when I was already like 40 hours in the game or something. It's crazy. Yeah, so I think that bar has to be improved some way or another. It's so important. It's one of the core of the series. I know they want to change, but they're gonna make it better than what it has here today. Yeah, so moving on, I have some, you know, not here, not there kind of complaints, so that I want to put here as well. Not necessarily positive or negative. The first one is like a bug that I've encountered during turn base, which is, you know, when you when you use arts or crafts that select targets. It's very weird that when I use the left or right arrows, or you know, I'm playing on my PS5 controller, right, using the arrow keys, they don't rotate between the characters in order, right? Like I can press left and you only select 2 characters and you keep bouncing around the 2 of them when there's clearly like 4 characters to choose from. It's kind of weird, right? And I'm not sure if any of you face this issue, and I'm not sure if it's a, you know, I've never been at a point where I cannot select the target that I want, so technically it's not a bug, it's just that it's not the behavior I expect, and it's a little bit irritating. Yeah. And then there's a UI bug where, you know, a lot of the skill description often don't convey enough about how it works, and honestly that there's not enough text, man. There's not enough room for text. Oftentimes it's like they're really scrambling to find ways to put text in there, and ends up being very small, or yeah, just too little space to describe what the move does. Yeah, so there's that as well. And then also, yeah, another point pointed out, you know, when you use boost, then they try to show you, oh yeah, using this holo core, so you know, you get this extra bonus effects, right? But then it comes out and goes away way too fast, more often than not. I find it very not useful. Like I'm very, like it irritates me because sometimes I forgot, right? Like keep changing around characters and all this. Yeah, I forgot, and I just want to utilize, and it's very irritating to me. Yeah, so these are some of my gripes. They're not necessarily bugs, not necessarily wrong, but just kind of on the down low for me. Right, the next subsection that I put here actually is for the Grand Old fight. So the Grand Old fight, Well, what I would say is, firstly, it's simple and wicked fun. Smash, smash, smash. You know, it's fun, right? Being in the OP mech in a way, right? It's like a Mask Rider, right? So, yeah, it's simple, it's fun, but honestly, I feel like that's where the positive ends. One point put here that's a bit more depth will be that fights where you can go into Grendel using Van for 3 turns. It is extremely swingy. Right? I put this as both a plus and minus because I don't know if this is an intended design decision. But basically, because when you go into these fights, you have to balance around both the fact that, oh, you might not have enough CP to go into the fight. I mean, into Grendel. And then on the other hand, you might go into Grendel. So these enemies are like neither here nor there, right? When you are not in Grendel, yeah, it's a slog to get through. It has way more health than usual. But when you're in Grendel, they're way too easy because they don't expect you to stay in Grendel forever. So it's like, it's not here or there for me. And then, yeah, the fight itself, yeah, you have skills, abilities, but, you know, really, I feel they lack a lot of depth, at least when you look at the Grendel on its own, yeah? Because it's really just boost and then smash whatever 3 buttons you can find, right? Yeah, so I feel that's a big lack of depth. Finally, being unable to use items or do anything else besides attack, defending, creates a huge problem, right? Yeah, so this is something that I faced at the later half. This is most apparent towards the end, right? When the fights are actually challenging. So I remember there were times where, well, the Grendel is obviously the tankiest. So when you do full screen attacks, like when fighting Dantes, obviously most of my allies are dead, right? At least at the difficulty I'm playing, yeah, most of them don't survive. And if Dantes chose to, you know, not attack, ignore Grendel and attack the rest of the crew, more or less they're all dead. And what happens? Yeah, what happens is, well, you have Grendel, who can only fight and defend, and cannot heal dead allies, so you're stuck. And then more or less I'll die from there, right? So you know, the fight is not sufficient, right? When the Grendel fight is meant to be difficult, that's where I have issues, right? Because the enemy you fight, you know, will technically be very strong and able to kill Grendel, right? And obviously, if they're able to kill Grendel, they'll be able to kill anyone in the cast, especially if they have a full screen AoE S-craft, right? More or less. And yeah, this is where I have a bit of an issue where, yeah, then now you have this issue where it's extremely swingy, like what I said, right? Yeah, and now I'm in Grendel all the time, yes, so it's good. The fights are, you know, either on par, or in this case, when it's intentionally difficult, creates a weird problem where, you know, it's not that I don't want, it's not that I can't win, it's just, yeah, the nature that the Grendel cannot use items caused this problem. Yeah, because if I could use the item just to revive one of my characters, I can revive the rest, and it's all good. But I am not able to do that. Yeah, so that is an issue and an encounter for the Grendel. Continuing on that note, I'm moving to the preparation phase, the setup. Right, so I want to start by covering the Zifa. Yeah, so there's a lot of points here that I have because I think this is one of the biggest change they have done. So firstly, by merging the Sky and Core Spell Sepith line system together with Erebonia's simplified chord system and giving it its own twist, right, makes for a lot of depth, a lot of fun. In fact, throughout the series, right. Yeah, the fact that there's multiple lines and each of them have their own sections of buff, debuffs, is extremely deep actually, and fun to tinker with. I'm good that I'm also kind of happy that early on, because things are very simple, there's not a lot of slots, not a lot of points, you don't, you know, you're not fully exposed to this section from the get-go. Yeah, so what happens is you're just gonna use what you have, slap what you have, and worry about this mechanic later on. So it's something that's always been there to help you with your battles, but it's only something you really put it under a lens, like once you have sufficient things to start configuring. So it's very organic in terms of the difficulty and how you learn about it. And it's not shoved down your throat like you need this, you absolutely need this. No, you don't need it. Yeah, which is very nice, at least early on. And then next is the Holo Core. Yeah, I like how the Holo Core pushes towards certain tropes in the game. Yeah, some of them will become a tank, some of them will become healer, right? It kind of pushes this agenda of what you want them to be. But you also need to remember the Holo Core bonuses only apply when you're in a boost, right? So it's not like a permanent Master Quartz kind of thing where it's there and it's always there, you're always this, right? You also need to consider the fact that your boost and all these things. So yeah, that layer of depth is good in my opinion. Very fun. Yeah, again, the 4 lines, attack, defense, arts, extra, is actually very interesting. The fact that there are levels as well, right? So not only do you have the skills that's mentioned in the shard kind of page, but also there's actually more, in a sense that most of these skills can have a more higher level variant, which is more powerful but requires specific combinations that are harder to achieve, right? So yeah, that gives even more thought into how you want to plan your arts. If you choose to, can make them very, very short. And it's something that at a higher difficulty, I'm sure you have to kind of at least pay a little bit of attention to and make some decisions that will help the battles ahead. Next, this is the first point that's kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say about this, but arts drivers. Arts drivers is yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what's going on, because yes, I like that you have limited arts and each of them comes like a pre-packaged program, right, with their own set of arts available and maybe some or 1 or 2 unlockable plugins. And it's supposed to make for kind of giving some direction, but in my opinion throughout the journey it's extremely cumbersome, hard to deal with, and often I just don't want to deal with it. Yeah, I just want to work with it. Whatever that's already placed on the character, I want to work with it. Because it definitely has a big decision on what kind of chords I set up on the character. So this leads to kind of like my next point, which is my hopes for Arts Driver is that it can still stay. Right? I'm sure it won't go away, but I think it really needs to be viewed alongside the Holo Cores, because in a way it's kind of have the same significance as the Holo Core, in that they kind of push the character in a certain direction, a certain theme. Yeah, so constantly needing to look at them as isolated, buffs, it's not really the case. Yeah, I mean, they can still be, standalone, but I want to look at them together, so I know, like, oh yeah, this character is doing this and this at the same time. There's too many things to keep tabs on. Yeah, too many micro decisions, and it makes me go like in circles. Yeah, and it's supposed to serve as some kind of foundation on setting up the characters. So another thing I would like the Arts Drivers to do is, to provide some baseline bonuses for maybe the various sections, right? Or enhance the certain bonuses. So I think that will make it more interesting than what it is, right? Right now it's just simply it's just a chore, right? That's what I feel, right? If I want to change, especially if I want to change my arts, and then not only do I need to change my arts driver, I need to consider my plugins, and after that I need to consider what's the Holo Core paired with it, and then I need to consider the chords I put, needs to be aligned to the arts that I'm gonna use, while also making sure that's nice. So it's very complicated, it's very deep, but at the same time it's a bit out of the way, right? It's like something that's causing problems, is what I view it as. Yeah, and it doesn't come with a lot of benefits besides the fact that of course the arts. Yeah. So yeah, so that's one point that is kind of lingering throughout my playthrough. On to the negatives, I think unlocking slots and plugins, being in a different menu, like, and some of them only being accessible at very specific locations. I don't understand why that's the case. Like, it's so troublesome. And then, you know, a lot of the depth of the game is not fully realized, I feel, at least with all these mechanics, because most of the slots are locked for way too long, right? Yeah, and the overall cost for spending Sepith to unlock them, yeah, much outweighs the rate it is earned in my playthrough. Yeah, and many lines and abilities has interesting abilities, but they do have very high requirements, right, for the elements and whatnot. But the quads in the game are still very rudimentary, very basic at this point, and it doesn't provide complexity or flexibility in terms of the bonuses. By the end of the game, enough for you to kind of try all this, right? I mean, coming from Reverie, that's obviously not a fair comparison. But yeah, when we look at the quads and all that in Reverie, we know like there's so many different combinations, and wow, anything under the sun, really, right? And I think that's I hope, right, and I do think that we'll move towards that direction, and that's kind of helps with the difficulty in the future games as well. Yeah, but yeah, looking forward to try new things, looking forward to all these new abilities, and I hope that in the future game we'll be able to have these improvements. So next is some of the smaller sections, right, such as equipment. For equipment, not much to cover, right? Weapons having custom slot when it's a secondary slot. Yeah, that's good. I think that's a good like thing that I'm still able to improve my character. Even if I do not have all the Mira in the world. And then one plus or minus point I say is that things are pretty expensive in this game. Either that or the rate where you earn money is insufficient. More or less, I don't go around like just hunting for money. Usually that's like kind of the side effect of me just grinding levels or like hitting, clearing the area, the dungeon, clearing the quest, clearing the 4 SPGs, yeah. But yeah, more like very early on, yeah, things have always been expensive and kind of keeps up being that way throughout the game. Well, next is that accessories are plentiful. Right, there's a lot of accessories in this game, but they kind of suck. They're not bad. Just, you know, they've they've definitely are the worst versions of themselves that they have ever been for a lot of them. I would love to see more exploration in this area as well. I think its equipment has been very stale for a very long time, and it's like this doesn't really help it, right? It's not just like becomes just want to slap something on. Oh, and this leads to my next point actually, which is because of the way I buy equipment, buy armor, buy shoes, all that. I often neglect this equipment menu altogether. Seriously, like I often forget, oh yeah, how do I go navigate to this menu, and I'm not sure if you all face it as well. Yeah, I tend to overlook putting accessories on new characters as well. I was just like, oh yeah, there's just no reason, right? Because I usually don't ever buy accessories, more or less. Maybe I trade for higher level accessories, but almost never buy them. So I more or less go to this particular equipment page only for accessories. Yeah, the rest more or less they're updated. And then of course, the command menu, the next thing that I want to talk about. Actually, I really don't really want to talk about it. I just want to bring it up because it's there. Not all that useful for all I care. Yeah, like it's the menu where you get to choose like, oh, yeah, in command and field where you want to put them, all these kind of things. It's really yeah, what I don't know what else to say other than it's not very it's not very effective. I don't bother with it after like the first chapter, and it's never been a problem or never been significant, right? I think that's the biggest problem I have. It's never been significant, and I think it's never meant to be significant. So why do I even bother with this thing? For the most part, right? Especially since I think one of its biggest, significance, I guess, is when you're going from field to turn-based. But the fact that most field to turn-based are, not important battles. Important battles are all turn-based exclusively. Kind of praise this emphasize this problem even more, right? So it's pretty redundant. Food. That's the next thing I want to talk about. Food, as in food items. Honestly, inside, just like previous game, tends to be slightly stronger than certain items, but it's not worth to keep making them. But at least there's a purpose now for the completionists. Eat them, eat all of them, and they are like these full team meals, right? They can only eat outside combat. Okay, those are okay. Although more often than not, I don't really need them. That's my other problem, because there's just a healing station, so why do I use them? Maybe for the CP, but a lot of them give them very little CP anyway, so yeah. And finally, food is absolutely a money sink. That's probably where all my Mimar went when I was trying to buy, right? Make sure I have enough money to buy all these things that I encounter. They add up. Yeah, there's 150 items, I think. And most of them few hundred, yeah, to a few thousand, but wow, that's a lot of money when you add all of them up, right? Yeah, a few 100,000 easily, right? Probably millions of Mira. Sorry, probably not a million, but for a few 100,000. Yeah. So I think that covers most of how I feel about combat or things related to combat. What I will say is, as a last, this is a ultra negative point that I wanted to point out. Is that, and it's something that's gonna go permeate throughout this whole talk as well, which is there's too many freaking menus. It's so disorganized and miserable to use this, honestly. Like, I don't know how you feel, but holy shit, navigating this menu is a nightmare. It makes me want to, stop playing the game. Like, why is there so many menus to think about? So many things. Like, there's already a lot to keep tabs on, right? In the first place, with the mechanics that is introduced, and the menu is just not helping. Yeah, it just makes things way worse and miserable. Like, well, I want to change holo coils on one menu. I want to change, I want to change plugins is on a different menu. If I want to update my slots, is a different menu. If I want to change the driver, is a different menu. Why is there so many goddamn menus, man? and the worst part is they are not even like in the same kind of menu. Some of them are different areas, different, like you have to go to the station, you have to access them via a whole different way, and it's like, holy shit. I remember, like, I even forgot like holo calls and how to change holo calls and ask driver for a while, because I'm like, oh, how? Right? Like, it's needlessly complicated. Yeah, and this problem is very apparent in combat, like setting up for combat, right? Yeah, so yeah, that's all I have for the combat section, and I will move on to the story section next. Okay, coming off the not so good note at the end there, just want to say that moving on to story, it's taking a while, and I realized that. So but I really want to share my opinions, and of course I understand it's not necessarily true that everyone else feels this way. That's why I'd like to hear what you all think, and feel free to go against my opinions, because I do like to think about different opinions, and come up with something even richer from after taking a look at different perspectives. So moving on to the story, I categorize this into many sections. So firstly, it's like the overall story for Trails Through Daybreak, Kuro no Kiseki, and then I'm gonna go through maybe chapter by chapter what I like, what I didn't really like, briefly, and then maybe some of the overarching narrative points that I thought was interesting. And then I'm gonna talk about faction or characters within the plot, right, and how I find them. There's a lot of characters, so yeah, that'll take a while. And finally, I think I will then maybe talk about some my soundtracks. Yeah, but also that's for the next section. Okay, so let's begin with saying the overall story. So for the overall story, I think Van is a very presented as a very nuanced and mature character, and you know, as we play the game, we explore through the lens of an experienced adult with many connections, right? So I like that a lot because it plays to the strength of you know, a veteran. If you're a seasoned veteran, right, playing through all the other games, you feel just at home with Van, right? Because he knows a lot, you know a lot. There's a lot that he knows that we know, and you know, maybe a lot of people don't in the world canonically, but we know and Van know, right? So that's kind of different. I think that's a huge plus point. And playing as and Kondo, I think highlighted this before, but we're playing as this game that actually kind of you are taking care of this, like being an older brother and taking care of the younger child. A lot of the employees, right? Of course, not necessarily true towards the end, but and you see how they grow rather than how you grow, right? So Van's growth kind of take a little bit of a backseat here. At least that's the idea, right? And then I think this game also has an extremely wide and varied supporting cast. It's crazy. Like for a first game, it's uncomparable, right? Like no game has so many supporting casts, in my opinion, and from different factions and groups. Yeah, it's almost feels like a Revelry. Yeah, Revelry might have more, but honestly, it's almost up there, in my opinion. Yeah, and that's crazy because it's supposed to be a new entry, right? New entry point, or at least marketed to be. Yeah, so a lot of them. So yeah, which is, you know, to my next point. This does not shy away from previous plot points, right? The overall story, and I really like that. Whether it's with Ouroboros, the DG cult, Gardens, right? Great Twilight, even Epstein, Professor Epstein. Yeah. It constantly bring them up throughout the game, whether it's because the characters are there directly or they have significant influence with the existing characters in the world, right? So this is a plus and minus, right? Because I think it will be a very interesting, a lot more interesting for us who have played through all the games. But I think to those that didn't, it's actually probably way too much spoilers, and at the same time, you probably don't even understand what's going on. Like half the time when they bring up this and that, I remember, yeah, when they start showing the church, the grouse readers, and everything, like all these big reviews, one after the other, like it's, you know, like it's nothing. So many terms to keep track of, right? Like sometimes even as a series veteran, is like I feel that there's already so many things on the board to keep track of. How about a new person who doesn't even, you know, it's the first time exposing themselves to all these terms? Just can be quite intimidating and potentially confusing. Yeah. So the next point I want to bring up that I think is quite positive is that in every game we basically had to play some form of quote unquote bracers, right? Like help out civilians, right? Bracers in Liberal, and then the police, the SSS, yeah, in Crossbell, and then we play as tours, right? School, doing assignments. Basically, you're kind of forced to do menial tasks. And in a way, there's no exception in this game, right? With the 4 SPGs. But I do think it's nice that they change things up in the way of how Upright Solutions, deals with complicated matters only and kind of straddles the line between good and bad. Yeah, so I like that a lot. I think that is something that helps make these so-called menial tasks a bit more meaningful, right? Which is something I'll bring up later on, because I think they're a little bit more memorable because of how like how this story, these so-called menial tasks has a little bit of grayness to them most of the time, and they range from not very problematic to those that are very problematic. So yeah, it does make it more interesting. And not only that, right, which is my next plus point, is that because of this, the setting, it allows Falcom to tackle a more mature and modern topics as well, such as like LGBT, drugs, etc. Right, you get to see a lot more controversial topics tackled. I wouldn't say they've done it the best, right, in terms of the resolution or maybe the way they go over it, but honestly, it's a breath of fresh air to see them tackle and willing to subject themselves to this topics, and being trying to find a way to integrate them into the game. And I think it kind of shows that kind of dedication of they want to try something new, right? And I feel even in this area it captures that as well. The alignment system. This is, I didn't cover this in combat because it's not combat related, but it is still a so-called a game mechanic, right? But the alignment system is a great story mechanic, and I love that it actually has significant impact to the story outcome at various points, right? The only issue I have with it is that by the time it has an effect, right, when you choose the faction at chapter 5, or towards the very end, where you try to speed up, right, who helps you get you to the final tower, what is it called, the final dungeon, right, before the final dungeon. Yes, that is where you get to see the impact of your efforts. But a lot of it, like for the most part of the game, like the first 80 hours, at least like first 100 hours even, okay, probably 80 hours, like closer to 80, 90 hours, I didn't really feel it. It's just something that kept growing, and I didn't know what it wasn't very clear or very meaningful up till later down the road. I mean, it's probably intended to be that way, but at the same time, I think constantly kind of reminding the player every now and then, hey, this is something pretty important, is a good thing as well. It's a good thing as well. And I think another kind of negative point that I want to bring in is that this system can stand to have more options. Currently, there's always 2 options for whenever you are chose to pick an action. I mean, I think there are times where there's 3, but it's rare. Yeah, so I do prefer if there's a little bit more options. And I was even talking to the rest of my friends that maybe it needs to have some kind of variance where you could get a lot of points in one alignment, but maybe at a cost of another. Yeah, so this also brings me to my next point, which is there's no reason to reject 4 SPGs, right? I mean, this is for me, I feel like this is one, because we're talking about Gray, and then Van is presented as this guy that has agency, right, has the choice to pick, and he's not gonna pick every single quests available, right? That's the kind of person he is. He will be presented with more options than he actually does. But realistically, in the story, the only time you reject quests is story quests, where he just chooses not to do because of the it's too risky, or doesn't like the person, or it doesn't make a lot of sense to help. But within the game, like when you're playing, you don't actually perform that role of like actively rejecting quests, and I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity. Of course, I think as a completionist, it's very easy, I just accept everything. But I think if that leads to different results, that can be very interesting as well, especially if it plays in to the story, right? And I think that's where it gives you, it makes you feel more like Van and think a little bit more when making these decisions, which can be very interesting. So I mean, the next point on my paper I already covered. Alignment never goes down, it only goes up. I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't, but I think it has room to do that. That would be very interesting. And I think another negative that I have for the story is it's still very structured and predictable, right? Day one is gonna be at Edith, and then after that we're gonna have some reason to bring us to a new place, and then we're gonna have some villain show up at the end, right? It's very formulaic, just like previous entries, and so it's very consistently paced, which is what I write in my next point. So it feels at home. I'm not saying it's particularly slow. I think it can be faster, definitely. And honestly, there are good examples even within this game where the pace is faster, right? And it needs to break things up, right? Because otherwise it gets very still over time when you're engaging in the same flow over and over and over, right? So I think great additions are like the prologue and the intermission. I think they're both like 10 hours each max, around there. I mean, of course, if you want to play it very slow, you can go a bit longer, but I think they're intended to be smaller cuts, right? And they achieve their goal. Like I don't mind if every chapter is of that length, just that maybe there's twice as many chapters. That's fine, because honestly it kind of helps make sure, like Falcom has this habit of like trying to be formulaic, trying to stick to what works, and I know it's been there, but I think it's important to make a change. It's important to make things not consistent. Maybe bring up the villain first, maybe turn the tables around, things like this make it interesting, because then I do not know what to expect, right? Things get a bit more boring because I know what to expect, right? So, right after the heat of the moment, I go back to the calm day to day, and then it's like going from a very high point all the way down to a very low point again, and then that feels like, oh man, I need to go through everything again just to get back there. Like sometimes, if you change things up, then wow, it keeps me wanting to play the next chapter, because I'm not very sure that's the case or not, and I think that will keep the players very interested, right, throughout the games. So this is something that I've been hoping that they would give it a try. So the next point, which is that instead that I point out here as a negative that I have, is that instead of expecting main characters to grow, I mean Van, right, to grow, this game is supposed to focus on more like the supporting cast and watch them grow, but I feel like it didn't really achieve that. A lot of the characters, yes, I think they did grow, but not in the spotlight, right? Maybe Agnes is the only one, right? But of course she's the second most important character, right? So makes sense. But a lot of the other casts, I feel like, especially towards the middle and hard end, like they are suddenly extremely devalued to just party members. And it's like after the conflict is resolved in their chapter, that's it, right? But that doesn't mean they are not great characters. I think the newly introduced characters are actually all pretty good, right? Like all new 7 introduced characters are pretty good. I'm gonna quickly go through this. I realize it's already 16 minutes. So villains in the game is pretty mad. I think reporters finally get what the hype they deserve, right? We always love the news. We always love all these reporter characters, and I think this first time I feel that yeah, they truly get what they deserve. As some sort of like main character, right? Okay, so another thing I want to point out is yeah, this game is not afraid to kill off characters. They have killed off many characters on screen, right? Which is very different from previously, and they suffer from pretty gruesome deaths. So that's it. You know, I feel like as a series veteran, I kind of was numbed by previous entries, and I'm unwilling to accept that they really perished because I'm very afraid that they'll be brought back again. Then next is that I think there's a very interesting tertiary cast of NPC characters in this game. You know, because of the 4 SPGs, because of the characters, I think a lot of them are very well written. But I think the downside to that is perhaps there's a little bit too many, which is funny. Yeah, because when I first started the game, I remember telling my friends like, I feel like they cut down the number of NPCs. And then as I played, I realized, okay, never mind. Yes, it went up. Right, and definitely I enjoyed it. I enjoy all of them having their own, storyline, but there's a little bit too much in my opinion because unlike a lot of the past where a lot of them are not very interesting or kind of hollow, this time around there's a lot of interesting NPCs, and because of that I feel like, wow, there's just so much more to keep track of. Like, oh, yeah. So I think the double plus point I put here, like indicating it's a very good point, is that I thoroughly enjoyed the B plot that's being explored between Van Elaine and Renee. Sorry if I butchered the names because I played it in Japanese. Showing that the main character have a life outside of outright solutions as well. So I think this is very, very good because firstly, this plot point does not start or end within this game, right? It clearly started before the what happens in this game, and it's definitely not concluded yet as of this game as well. And then it's also not a villain plot like Ouroboros and the overarching story, right? Per se, right? So I think the thing that's been missing when I look at Cold Steel, when I look at all the other games, is that a lot of their allies is what they're gonna have the whole time in this game, and that is why I think there's there's a lack of variety, right? Like I can see that the characters they are surrounded by these characters all the time, right? Like Reen is gonna constantly be with class 7, but here it feels a little bit different where they are important characters to the main character, and we get to see that perspective as well, and I enjoy that a lot. A lot of things. So the last point I put here for main story is a lot of things they expect player to infer the meaning of. So they need you to infer and a lot of implied moments in the game where you just yeah, they just drop the bomb, right? And you're like, wait, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like this. Yeah, so most of which is because of spoiler reasons, of course, because they are not sure. I think that's what they are trying to do as well, but there are some that I think it's a bit of a stretch, right? So I like it and I don't like it. I like it because it makes me, they know we're not stupid, so yeah. yeah, you don't have to tell us everything and lay it out there like as though we have never read the story. But at the same time, there's some that's a little bit of a stretch, right? Like Quarter being a victim of the DG cult. Like, well, what? it wasn't really clear to me until it was explicitly just kind of mentioned, right? Yeah, so that's it for the overarching story. I mean the story. So next I'm gonna go chapter by chapter. So here I'm just gonna briefly go through each chapter and what I like and what I don't like, what I think it does. Just small things that I want to point out that I enjoy. I'm not gonna like go break down every single detail, but here it is. For the prologue, I think it's very straightforward. The objective, just to set the tone for the rest of the game, and I think it did it well. Yeah. Not much to say about it other than I like it. I like it a lot. Give it more of it. I like that. For the first chapter, we get Pearl Village. I think it's the typical, like, you know, the village that's offsite that you see a lot throughout the games. But I think the big difference is we immediately see the stakes are pretty high. You know, we start seeing you know, Ouroboros, Jaeger, and then Melchior, which at first I thought, I didn't think of Gardens. I remember at first I thought of him as someone from maybe the vampire section or something. When I look at how Aida and the rest of the Jaegers transform, right? It's a bit of a callback to Red Moon Rose, and that's something that, you know, I'm not sure if it's relevant or not still, and that's something I hope to see her play out, you know, eventually. Yeah, so I think for chapter 1 that's all I have. Chapter 2, Langport, I think like the reference, you know, I really like the reference to the actual place on Earth. Forgot what it's called off my mind, but I pointed out in the game. I'm going to dig it up. Where the final dungeon is at. I mean for chapter 2, right? And I think again, I like when you know, have play some historical reference based on something that exists, you know, in a real world here. It really makes things even more interesting. Yeah, and what else do I have? So besides that, I think Unfiltered Aaron, right, is kind of vast, but I like that that's exactly who he is, right? Like, I don't hate it. The dynamic, I think this is when the dynamic really started to grow. By this point, when all four of them, right, Angias, Ferry, Fan, and Aaron, when they're together, that's when I really, you know, and that's where I feel like, yeah, I really see them kind of work together and then kind of grow. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. So that's chapter 2, Langport. Chapter 3, Tarbart. I got not a lot of things to say about Tarbart other than this is almost definitely my least favorite chapter. Simply because it felt like it went on way too long. I don't know if you guys feel that way. It felt like it went on and on and on and on. You know, I mean, definitely, you know, I think the theme is very interesting. Vulgarities at the forefront of these chapters, you know, screaming a lot of nightlife, a lot of drugs. I like that. I like that a lot. In that sense that they're trying to explore these themes. Just that kind of went on for way too long, right? For my liking. Yeah. So I think that's my only gripe with this chapter. Yeah. So other than that, it's okay. It's okay. I think it's interesting. And next, Basil, chapter 4. I think easily the the least memorable, right? The chapter 3 is my least favorite. This one's like chapter 4 is like my least memorable. Despite being, you know, supposedly pretty important location, right, Basil. And I didn't like the storyline with Professor David. At least, you know, like how he somehow got brainwashed into wanting to do the atomic weapon. Yeah, and then of course there's a bit of callback to Reverie with the Elysium and all that. Yeah, it's kind of it's actually kind of surprising, you know, like we have Elysium, you know, this talking about Elysium back in Reverie, but somehow nuclear weapons weren't invented yet, and then now we are talking about nuclear weapons. I mean, it's good. It's good, again, a parallel to what we have here in our world. I think it's always interesting, makes you think. But yeah, I don't really like the way it's delivered or executed. Yeah, so I find it a bit odd. I can't really put it to words why, but yeah, I don't really like the way chapter 4 played out. Of course, we've got to finally meet Professor Hamilton. Finally, finally during this time. So, you know, that's great. I think I remember one of the rooms, her house, I think, Porter's house. You got to see all these characters. Yeah, that's very interesting. It's actually a very nicely done house that I think a lot of people just completely missed. Yeah, so that's a side note, but yeah. The best moment in for me is definitely Reset towards the end. Yeah. Yeah, that part is very interesting to me with her story, and it got me very interested in her story. Yeah, which is, I think, not, you know, fully explored yet. Yeah, so, you know, I think she's one of the characters that I'll look forward to in the future games as well, for sure. Then next is Intermission, where we go to Long Lai Pu. Yeah, I love it. I love the Intermission. Again, it's a prologue-like chapter. It's longer than prologue for sure, but it's definitely shorter than the other chapters thus far. And I love the whole Shizuna, Judith, Mare. Yeah, I love all their funny interactions. The introduction to Shizuna is finally, you know, gonna see our master swordswoman. Very interesting. Judith, I think, shine in this chapter. It's kind of funny that it took her this long, but that's something I'll talk about later on as well when I talk about the way it's handled. And the mayor situation. The mayor situation, you know, is kind of like I'm not really interested in it, but you know, how dare you touch Yumi? And then yeah, a lot of these chapters kind of set up for what's to come, and I love the Maxime storyline. Actually, like, surprisingly, yeah, I'm rooting for you, man. I mean, please, I love to see him redeemed. For asshole that he is, I think you know, it's also very interesting that the way it played out. Yeah, quite unexpected, right? But I'm glad that it's introduced at this point. So yeah, that's for Intermission. For chapter 5, Oracion. Well, I've said this a lot with my friends, but basically I expected this to be like a finale. Like, if I didn't know there's a finale, this literally played out like it's finale. And I love how the stakes were raised. All groups were involved. Wow, like, this is like peak, like, spoilers. Like, this is like maximum spoilers territory. Like, every group from the past is here. Easily the best Van and Elaine scene, right? At night, right? I love that scene, the cinematography, the way it's presented, the fact that, you know, it shows maturity, and I really enjoy scene where they talk about it at their, you know, usual location. And also definitely heartbroken for Elaine because of what she needs to do. You know, like, whole life trying to, you know, convince herself that her dad isn't problematic, but he is. Yeah, and, you know, having to deal her hand. I think that's something very special about this chapter. I really like it. It definitely felt like the climax of the game to me. Like, honestly, even when I consider finale, Yeah, this really felt like it's the climax where there's a lot of emotional stakes. There's a lot of actual stakes as well. And this is when the alignment was significant and decided who to go with. I went with Ikaruga. Of course, right? It's the hardest one that you can go for. If I'm not wrong, you needed like multiple alignment criteria to add up to 5. Yeah, so I definitely went with them and got to try out Shizuna. I loved using her as well. So that's for chapter 5. Finale. Not gonna lie, finale felt like a bit of like a post game. The way the finale pre-dungeon is executed is interesting, but I would hope we didn't need to come from 2 very long days. What I mean by that is, before we go into the final dungeon, there's this whole like hitting, like clearing out the mobs, right? And then talking to everyone, going to another area, rescuing people by people, batch by batch. Yeah, I was hoping we didn't need to come to that. I mean, that's actually very interesting in concept. I think the only problem I had was that we came from 2 very long days of nothing. Yeah, I think it was like, was it? I can't remember the actual dates, but basically I remember it's like late November and early December, right? Yeah, like those are more or less not much. It's not much. Of course, there's that rooftop scene with Van, Elaine, and Kincaid again, and I like that scene. But I actually hated Van's response because it kind of reminded me of why, like how much Van is like Reed. Although they are not the same character, they are fundamentally very similar, and maybe in a way I'm just tired of it after so many games of Reen, right? It feels like, oh no, it's another Reen. Yeah, that's when it kind of dawned on me, right? So yeah, maybe I'm a little bit ticked off by that, but other than that, I would say, yeah, I actually like the fact that the finale, the way it's set out is very different from previous games. And I'm very glad that the final dungeon is not stupid long, right? And actually pretty quick. Yeah, it actually was pretty quick, and I like that. In fact, yeah, I like that it's like a last hurrah, but it didn't really felt like the kind of final dungeon, right? Like chapter 5's dungeon felt longer, like way longer, because it took every day was part of the final dungeon in that sense, right? But finale didn't feel that way. Finale was just very quick, and I don't mind it just being very fast, like a gauntlet, right? It doesn't need to be so deep, honestly. Yeah, we've played through many final dungeons. Yeah, though it can be something we can. I think we can always innovate and try something new. So I like the way they did it this time around. And I think the last thing here I said here is thank goodness it didn't end on a cliffhanger. Yeah, because that would have sucked. Ending it on a cliffhanger again would piss me off so much. I remember this was one of the reasons why I even considered not playing the finale, because I was like, what if it just did a Cold Steel 1, did a Cold Steel 3 and all this, and then I'm gonna be like, I want to play Daybreak 2 now, but if that was the case, I probably would have held off playing the finale until Cold Steel 2, Cold Steel 2, Daybreak 2 is coming out. Then I'll start playing the finale to make sure, like, I'm ready to catch Daybreak 2 when it's out. Otherwise, I have to wait like 10 months from the time of speaking, maybe. Okay, maybe not 10 months, but at least half a year. Yeah. So I think that's what I have for chapter by chapter. And next up, we'll talk about the characters or the factions. Yes. Okay, so up next, I'm gonna quickly run through the different factions and characters that I think was interesting. Starting with the bistro, right? So I think Paulette, Yume, Maxine, Victor. Yeah, I love that. I love them. Yume, the best ball of sunshine, and Paulette, I think, is truly a big-hearted woman to be able to give Maxime a chance. And Victor, typical angry dad, granddad. I like it. I like his dynamic with Van. And you can tell that they all, they really are like family with Van, right? Then we have the CID. CID, Kilika, Kincaid, Kayla, Cody. Honestly, yeah, not too much to say about CID. Except for Kincaid, I think Kincaid is probably my favorite Makias trope like character. Yeah, I like Kincaid a lot. I think he's executed very well, very different from the previous detective or CID like Ace Detective, right? Like, yeah, like Dudley or Kincaid. I mean, so Kincaid, Dudley or Makias. Yeah, I really liked him, and I love to see more of him actually. Even getting to play with him for a little bit was really interesting and really fun. Yeah. Of course, the guild. Yeah, Elaine. I think she's like one of the main reasons why the story is so good. Honestly. Yeah, I can't wait to see more of her story with Van. Although I write here, although I'm pretty confused about their situationship, like what's going on, like why. Yeah, like they clearly like each other, like love each other, and they don't dare to. I mean, they dare to show it as well. So I'm very confused as to like why they just can't get together. I know. We now know about the demon and all that, but yeah, to me like that is still not a very good reason, right? So are they gonna get together now in the future? So now the demon is sealed, I feel like not if you're relying on that on the, I mean, if that's the sole reason, it's kind of weird to me, right? Yeah, so that's why I find this situationship a bit complex. Of course, I think Elaine also has a problems with the dad and all that, but it's resolved in Orashion, so hopefully there's nothing holding them back from getting together. Hopefully, right? Zin. Okay, yes, Zin. Yeah, finally got to see you back, man. Feels good to see you back. Like, holy shit. If Kevin is the forgotten main character, Zin is probably like one of the most important bracers that was forgotten. Right? Ever since the sky. Yeah. And it's very funny because he's one of these characters that kind of represented the East, right? Represented Calvard, one of the rare representations of Calvard that we got. Fee, yeah, glad to see Fee. Yeah. But honestly, not the style of the show. So good marketing material, I guess. I glad to see her, but playing as her, not that fun. Honestly, I've never really enjoyed playing as Fee, but she's very popular in the popularity poll, so I guess that's probably why Falcon bring her back. Yeah. Elvis. I mean, new C rank bracer, right? Like, I stopped hating, bro. Right here. Regina. Yeah. I feel bad for you. I hope. I hope they'll develop something along the way. I think one character I forgot to miss out is Gray. Interested to see his story play out as well. Yeah, he definitely sounds like a more than what he leads to kind of character, right? Sounds like he has some relation with Prince Oliver and unknown family or whatever. Like, yeah, I think that's more than meets the eye with this guy. So, yeah. So next, Heiyue, Chao Li, or as sly as ever. I think for a very long time, Chao is like the face of Calvard because that's all we got, right? And I mean, he's a very prominent character, and yeah, for a long time it's like, oh yeah, that is, that's Calvard, right? Like he kind of represented Calvard together with like Rocksmith and all this. Yeah, so is getting to see him again, yeah, sure, definitely expect that, but man, he wasn't doing that much. Come on. And other than being sly as always, right? Yeah, why are you in so many games? Like, give the others a chance, please, or you know, or step it up, right? Step it up and actually, you know, become important. Risha, yeah, I mean Risha. Next is Risha. You know, Risha. I like her relationship with Judith. Glad to see her back. But come on, bro, come on. Who thought the model was a good idea? Like come on. It really is it not obvious that it's so problematic? It's literally so problematic it breaks the physics system. And like certain scenes. Like they had to go out of the way to, you know, make it work, I feel. And really, yeah, I don't know what to say, man. I feel like they did her dirty, man. Yeah, like she's so much more than her chest. Like, please, uh, fix that, please. I don't know, make her use her qigong technique again or something, man. Like give some. I don't care what explanation. Just please, don't turn her into a like sex doll or something. You know, like come on, like she's such a good character early on, and it just feels like Welcome decided to put all the fan service on her and ruin things. Ashen, I remember at first I thought I thought of her as the other girl. I forgot what's the name, the Risha's best friend. And I'm like, what? Why is she? And then I was like, why is she simping for Chow? But okay. Yeah, turns out it's a different character, but yeah, I'm okay. I don't really care about her. And the rest, Fan and Kien, the Elder, yeah, I think we'll see more of them. But whatever, you know. Next, Ikaruga. Ikaruga, let's talk about Kurogane first. Kurogane, I like this guy. He's kind of funny. Yeah, kind of this stupid ninja. Yeah, he's intimidating, but also kind of funny guy when you know him. Sounds that way. Shizuna. She does scream a lot of "don't mess with me" vibes. You know, I'm not even serious. I'm not even trying. But otherwise, throughout the game, she hasn't shown much, right? And it always felt like Van is kind of like being the babysitter for him and for her. Kind of funny, kind of funny. But I expect a lot more from her with Daybreak too, because she's just there for Daybreak. Doesn't like if I look at it as a vacuum with no build up and anything, just not a very, just didn't feel anything from her other than, oh, she's very strong, right? But definitely she's gonna become a very important character, I'm sure, right? Whether it's the background strength and all these elements, yeah. Yeah, Ouroboros. Oh yeah, same old Walter. Yeah, just want to beat things up, huh? Yeah, a bit more personality this time, but you know, can't really change much. I think, you know, Walter's Walter, so not much to say about him. Then there's the Butterfly and the Oathbreaker. Butterfly is very cool design. I like her dress a lot. I like the weapon a lot. But very underwhelming in combat. Didn't really feel much from her. And then Oathbreaker is like, yeah, that guy is cool and wicked, and actually has a lot of Weissman vibes. Yeah, in fact, we didn't have just a really bad villain in a long time, and I think he is gonna be that guy eventually. Yeah, and even worse, potentially worse than Weissman. In a way, I look forward to it because we haven't had a villain per se that's like Weissman. In terms of like a bigger villain, right? There's a lot of like Dantes. There's a lot of, you know, Joachim Günther. Like they are just villains, big bad villains for that one game, and that's it. But as in overarching villains that are just genuinely pure bad, we haven't had that for a while, and I think he's a making of a better Weissman, and in that sense, I look forward to it. Right. But holy shit, this guy's trash. Yeah. Next is the Grouse Raiders. Not much to say. Sally's, I think I thought she was Shirley, right? when I saw the trailer. Leon, I would say like chill out with Van, man. Like I keep keeping him strays, man. Like what did he do? But you know, it's literally your stigma to chill, man. Like calm down, calm down, bro. Yeah, that's how it feels. I'm happy to learn more Grouse Raiders. Finally know like more than half of them, right? Like I think 8 of them, right? So can't wait for that eventual arc where we know all of them. Iscariot. Okay, so this is the first time we know Iscariot. This team from the Purple Secret team from the Purple Guards. A bit more dynamics. I like that. I like that we learn all these things. Ash and Arshalat, the kind of vice captain. You know, bearing the kind of not title, but you know, calling others heretic, wearing the title heretic hunter, kind of, kind of screams Kevin, man. Right? Like come on, obvious. It's a very obvious reference. But I think he's kind of funny guy as well. The man still got heart, right? He's not humanless. I think when he decided to let Elaine's dad be handled by Elaine, well, yeah, I didn't expect that, and I thought that was a big moment for, you know, kind of describing this team. Yeah, or at least I hope so. Yeah, of course, it's hinted at that the captain is not like Ashlat, so that's something we need to think about a bit more. Reporters, right? That's next one. Finally, like I said, I really like Dingo. Really like Dingo. I think he could spare to have more moments, but I like his storyline. And I do have a question actually for Dingo, which is that, which is something that I'm still not sure of if it's ever mentioned, which is, yeah, before he was working as an information or reporter, he was with Dantes. Doesn't that mean it's like part of DG? Like, is he part of DG? Like, I'm a bit confused on that point. But regardless, yeah, I like that scene a lot. I like the scene. I like there's a scene before where they learn about the camera and all that. In chapter intermission, I think, or chapter 4, where and then it leads to that moment where it snaps the camera and the picture gets sent back to them. So, I really like this scene. That's not much else to say. Mariel, I think, can't help but, you know, see how this girl grows. I think she's gonna become someone important, hopefully, in the future. Yeah. And then there's the ETSW, right? Resets, bosses, Gilliam and Kasim. Frankly, I don't care about these guys. They're pretty awful in this game, in my opinion. And they seem more like a Daybreak 2 or a Kai kind of issue, you know, that I don't want to think about yet. Yeah, they just scream bad guy energy, right? And yeah, I don't really care about them. The detectives, just kind of sad that there's this detective department that's not the police, that's not the CID, and then they're just there to be useless for the most part, like Nate and Daswani. Yeah, they're definitely overshadowed by CID, and it's kind of whatever, you know. Gambler Jack, yeah, it's finally good to see Jack and Harley from the books. But I didn't expect Van to know them so well. Jack, yeah, maybe, but I didn't. But yeah, I wasn't too sure. So yeah, really happy to see them. Or Red. Honestly, nothing much to say about them. The Prince and Najee. Yeah, not too much to say about that. Nothing really interests me. For the villains, like, okay, I have something to say about them, but I think let's just say they're really bad. They're really bad because I think a lot of them are copied from Cold Steel. Like, there's Viola, which is just like Scarlet from Cold Steel 1. Alexandra is the same as, I forgot what's his name even, that died in Cold Steel 2, right? Same guy with the same Imperial Liberation Front. Like, Olympia is Altina but worse, right? Emotionless, but worse. Like yeah, just Altina but worse. Molecule. I mean, I don't like that guy. That guy just screams crazy bad. And yeah, I don't know. He's just a bit nuts. It's a nut job, right? Don't like the guy. Dante's, right? Dante's is screw in the brain, but I don't know. He feels like feels so hollow. Yeah, I don't really like. Didn't really like Dante's. So Arioch is probably the only interesting villain, or at least the only villain that interests me. With a bit of lore, how he's trapped, how he's continuously being hunted down. Yeah, he does seem, he definitely screams a bit more substance to me than the other characters, and that's why I'm quite interested, right? He even shares a bit more about his lore back in the days. Yeah, and the dynamic of Judith. I mean, it's very weird, but yeah, sure. Didn't expect that, interesting. And I wonder how he actually went to watch the movie, because he can't get rid of the armor, right? Like, if I understand this, there's no way he gets rid of the armor. The armor is part of him. If not for the armor, he can't exist. So yeah, so that's the part that's kind of I don't know what's going on, but very interesting. I mean, the most interesting villain to me is probably Arioch. Yeah. And then and then he appeared in the mini game at chapter 5. Or totally forgot to talk about that, I guess. The final dungeon, chapter 5. And then there's when you fight normal monsters, he can just appear randomly. Honestly, I thought that was a pretty interesting mechanic to spice things up in the chapter 5 dungeon. Yeah. I mean, of course, irritating, but as long as it doesn't happen too often, it's okay. I don't hate it. Student council. I don't really care about the rest of them. Ren, of course, there's Ren. Yeah, I love to see Ren. Glad to see Ren. But more or less, she's kind of playing a support role, not doing much. Right? There's one or two scenes where they tie up some loose knots that was talked about in the Reverie Daydream. But other than that, you don't see too much. I don't think there's too much to talk about. Or Ren, even at the end, right, her and Elaine was trapped, not able to help in the final scene, which is whatever, but yeah, I love to see more, and I know we'll see more, right, of Ren. Yeah, and then finally some other characters here. I think one I have is Graham Hart. Very interesting to see Mr. President, but we didn't really see what he's working towards, and I think we'll find out more towards the end. Rocksmith, I think he's better off where he's being now, honestly. Just continue being here, man. I think he's so much better than being a politician. Here I put Nina. I mean, yeah, I'll talk about her for sure in the future. Like, what am I thinking about future aspects, right? Yeah, like who the hell are you? Yeah, Sarah and Shahina. I don't care about them, honestly. Hamilton, I talked about her already. Finally, we know them. Cronkite. Cronkite screams evil villain to me, actually, like, because it's set up to be the next big villain. That's my guess. Here the rest of the names that I put, I think Julian is I definitely hope to see a bit more of him. Right, the transfer student from Taurus. Yeah, he's the transfer student from Taurus. I think that's interesting. And then Hermes, Hermes, I don't know what's the name. Yeah, like, do we actually know who she is, or is it? It might be pretty important. That's my guess. Like, might be pretty important. So I don't know who she. Yeah, but that's all for all the characters. Like, this game had a crazy amount of characters. So we're talking about like over 80 characters, and like kind of significant, supporting, major, minor kind of characters. And that's not even including the NPCs I talk about. That's why I said, like, holy shit, that's a little bit much. Yeah, that's a little bit much to keep track of. When I started writing this list, then I realized, okay, that's way too much. Yeah, so next I'm going to talk about the soundtrack. So I'm trying to keep this section small. I always love Trails soundtrack. In fact, I think that's one of the first reasons why I like continue playing the game. But honestly, I had very little expectations. Everyone was talking about how things hasn't been so good ever since, and honestly, Reverie by far had the least memorable set list for me. But this time around, I think a lot of the OST grew on me, and quite a lot of them got better over time. Yeah, I wonder if I'll bother editing and adding some of these clips, but when I talk about them, maybe I will do it. But let's see. A lot of the tracks are actually mellow tracks, and I think when it hit the right chord in the important moments, it really elevates those moments, and I think that's really what some of the highlights of the game, right? Some of the highest point of the games are these points, and I thoroughly enjoy them. I think there's a lot of clever use of the OST at times as well, because I realized a lot of them serve as like double tracks in a way. Like the first half and the second half of the track is pretty different, and it can be very interesting when you get to hear them being used at different points. Yeah, it kind of evokes different emotions. Yeah, so I mean, these are some of the positive points. I think negative will be that unfortunately I think it's quite overused, and a lot of them becomes very stale, right? But a lot of them are still very good, but because they're overused, right? So it doesn't feel as impactful as they would be if they were more delicate with when they play them. Ultimately, I think it's nowhere near its glory days, but a good step forward, a good step forward, and I'm hoping it keeps improving, right? I remember there was a time where the soundtracks alone hard carries a lot of moments in the game, motivating me to push through. It's crazy how little, they care about it now. I mean, I'm sure they still do, but versus what it was 10-15 years ago in its glory days, yeah, it's a little bit sad. That's it. Here are some of my favorite tracks. So all variants of the opening track, Namonaki Akuma no Hate, or no Wate, right? I think it translates to the nameless devil's hand or something like this. I think one of the best openings ever. Like, I loved it. I loved it. Honestly, when I first hear it, I was like, oh, this, like, it gives me such a good impression of Daybreak. And the menu theme in the Dawn is, wow, blows me away, right? In the Dawn is very good. Rise of the Grandel team. Yeah, at first I was like, I'm not really sure about this team, but as I hear it, I'm like, yes, this team is good. This team is really good. That gets me real hyped. What is ahead of you? Technically, people say it's not Elaine's team, but I just say Elaine's team. I think most people know which one I'm talking about. It's the one that you hear in Reverie, right? Yeah, that's the team. I like that team a lot. Let Me Know My Spriggan as well. Role to Play. They all serve this same role. These tracks are really interesting. I like them a lot. Get Rid of the Urgent Menace is like the chapter 3 dungeon theme. The tower, when you climb the tower. Tower? No, what is it called? It's the hotel. When you climb the hotel. I think I like that. That was one of the Misc tracks. Like when I had to went through each and every single track to play, and then I realized, oh, I missed this track. Yeah, this track is really nice. 13th District, the Dark Light Town. Yeah, I loved it. I loved that track a lot. Shizuna's team, Silver Sword Saint. It's not bad, right? It's an introduction of her. And then the other side of the Cloudy Sky, yeah, another banger hit. And Marginal Crisis. Oh, I love this team. This is the team for the 3 days in a Russian dungeon. Oh man, honestly, I was like, actually at this point, there was not many teams that really impressed me, but this one stood out. Like 3 days in the dungeon, and I loved it every like it. I only grew to love it more and more, which is rare. A lot of songs, it's like it's really good, and then it starts to kind of peter down when you hear it more and more, especially dungeon teams, right? Because you hear them continuously. But yeah, this team is so good. Beyond the Dawn, the ending theme is very good. I mean, there are some, you know, special mention, not say honorable mentions, but yeah, there's few like the final theme, the final dungeon theme, the final boss theme. They're all not bad. I think they are just not my cup of tea, but they are pretty good. So this concludes the soundtrack section. If I ever choose to play them, I might not just play them as I talk about it, because I realize I will give a very little time in this section. I might just play them throughout the games. Sorry, what am I talking about? Yeah, throughout this edit, and you'll get to listen to them as well. Yeah. So up next is like some points I wanted to point out that I really don't really have a place for them. I put them in the others and miscellaneous area, just a very short one. Firstly, I really like the lore and encyclopedia in the archive section of the game. Fantastic. I loved it. You know, I think we really need a book. Like, we can really actually have a book next time for all this lore. I think it would be so interesting. Zemura and all this lore it's been years in the making, and I really hope they keep up that level of you know, robust and good storytelling that they are doing. So, well, no books this time around. That's talking about books, right? No books this time around, in-game books, novels. But the movies were alright. I like them, but I do hope they'll be more fleshed out. A lot of them are a bit too short for my liking. The brochures are, right? Yeah, I do hope they get a bit more time. Maybe a sequel, maybe a follow-up. Like, yeah, get multiple episodes, episodic. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Next is, I like the turbo speed factor for the game. Basically, you can choose like feel and turn-based, right? And all this, so it's very nice that I don't need to keep turning on and off turbo like in the previous entries. I remember I hated turning turbo because what happens is I'll always ram into things when I'm trying to move around, and I'll always get backstabbed by enemies because things doesn't slow down when I'm engaging or close to enemies. Yeah. And then finally, the last positive point I want to bring out also is the cinematography, the attention to placement and themes in this game really stands out. I feel like it is a class of its own from all the other Trails games. Yeah, like maybe, of course, you know, I think mainstream media definitely obviously has games of higher quality, but I think just looking at the growth within the series, yes, it's on a class of its own, and they really did a lot of work there. I really want to, you know, hope that they continue to do so, because it's so important that they do so. It's very good. That's it. Again, I want to emphasize again. I think I've emphasized this before, but oh my god, the menus. The menus are just so bad, are so terrible in this game. I really hope they address them. Right? I think it's very apparent that the menus are a problem because everyone was complaining about it. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? And even after getting used to them, still feels very bothersome, right? Like, every time you press this, press that, there's so many menus and there's so many repeated content, right? So I think that they need a better way to consolidate all of this, because that is the true nightmare of the game, not anything else, right? I remember back in Reverie, I said it was a nightmare. It's a menus nightmare, but even Reverie is not that bad because, frankly, it's pretty intuitive, and at least for Reverie, I can give it a pass because that game is more focused on combat and inherently designed to have many playable characters. So inherently, it's gonna have more issues than the rest. So I give it a pass, and yeah. But Kuro is like, holy shit, how do you have somehow potentially more menus than Reverie, and so messy and difficult to navigate? Even saving the game and all that, like, so menu in the menu, like, come on, come on. I'm sure we can do better than this. Yeah, so I think that's all I have. Finally, I like to conclude. In the sense that for this game, there's, I think there's a lot of changes that were much needed, and they really, changed the direction of the game, I think, of the series a lot with this title, and it's headed towards a good direction. That's what I feel. That said, yeah, it's definitely rough around the corners, like mentioned before, and I think they're really too focused on trying to change everything. Like, some things just became a mess. Like, they just want, they didn't care what they want to change. Everything was different. Yes, like they just wanted to try so many things, but unfortunately, some things stayed the same, like the pace, the consistency. And then there are other things where they keep changing it until, like, what's going on? Why do you have you overdone it? Of course, as their first kind of title that's kind of bringing the series forward, bringing the genre forward, understandable that there's gonna be mistakes, there's gonna be changes that probably shouldn't happen, but there are also good changes, right? So I fully understand that, and I fully anticipate them to address these concerns, because it's very obvious, and it's gonna require, refinement rather than changing. So I think that's the plus point, right? That's it. I do think that, they need to really look hard at the story, right? Because, I really don't need it to be so long and stretched out. Yeah, I mean, of course, yes, ban for bug and all that, but like I said before, I'd rather they release multiple titles than trying to make sure everything is kept within reason, within one title. Like, that doesn't really change too much, like if you jam 2 games in one game and then you call it one game, right? It's like the reverse of what they did with Cold Steel. That's not the point, right? If you put Cold Steel 1 and 2 into one game and call it Cold Steel 1, it's still bad, It's not the fact that it's 2 games, because it's stretched out. That's the main reason why people have gripes with how slow the story is taking. So like I said before, I think the good point is that these problems are easier to fix, as there are more refinements and improvement rather than major overhauls from here forward. And actually, I'm very glad that this game actually gave a lot of plot points and story elements to push the plot forward. Yeah, that I'm gonna talk about in the next section. But a lot of them didn't, they just presented. They don't actually make any meaningful progress on the overarching plot. Right, so this game technically, if you're only concerned about overarching plot, not much have happened. Yeah, they introduce new terms, introduce new groups, introduce new conflicts or things that's already happened, but technically nothing changed since Reverie yet, right? Significant at least. Overall, it's not my favorite entry, but I'll rank it pretty high, and probably above Reverie, right? Yeah, I think people who don't know my rankings, I love Azure, right? I think Azure, Sky SC is like the best of the best out there, and then very closely followed by Zero, Sky FC, Zero, Sky FC, and what's that game called again? Sky the Third. Yeah, they're all quite close for me. The Cold Steel games were a downer. Reverie and Cold Steel 3 sits on top of the pack, right, for me. And I think Daybreak is above that. Yeah, so I would say somewhere in the middle. And finally, I think one last thing I want to say is that I think they really didn't need to force that big cast, these 8 team members. A lot of them feels kind of forced towards the end, right? And I think they're perfectly fine as guest characters. Yeah, and I hope there's less of this, right? And perhaps I love to see more interactions between the cast members that is not Van or Anya's, right? So that there's a bit more authenticity into these characters rather than just, you know, a relationship with Van, just like, you know, the Reen and Class 7 problem. Yep, so that's kind of my general conclusions for this particular game. And then up next is future speculation, right? So technically, this is still technically I'll still talk about content that was presented in this game, but it's more of like for the overarching plot, right? And it's more of like for you know, for the future game, like what I want, what I expect, and things that interesting details that were mentioned or that will be probably relevant in the future. So yeah, so starting with some of this overarching narrative, I think it's hinted at that Dante's by Dante's that Gehenna does not exist. I actually believe that. Sky the Third is Kevin's interpretation of it after all. That is something that, what do you all think? This is the point where I really am curious of what your thoughts are, because these are the points where it's up there, and you know, I'm sure they'll come into play in the future. The next point is the Roaring Lion, right? Gerard, whatever you want to call him, is alive, right? So why is he still alive? At first, you know, I thought it's the curse, but yeah, they have explicitly mentioned, you know, it's nothing to do with the curse. It's very similar, and he lost his stigma, right? So that is true, and his stigma is passed on to Gaius. So if that is true, then what exactly is going on here? Yeah, but why is he still alive? I think that is definitely an intentional plot point that was dropped towards the end. The Iscariot and Gauss Ritter internal conflict dynamic, you know, it actually complicate matters with the church, and now there's many groups. We know about the Shranks, I think 100,000 for the Iscariot or Purple Guards, and then we have like 10,000 for the Gauss Ritters. Yeah, that is very interesting. And then it's also brought up, right, that Iscariot's leader is unknown, and not many people know it. So I think that's gonna be a big mystery that's gonna be played around for a while. But at the same time, I have a suspicion that it's Nina, right, which is who I'm gonna talk about next. It's potentially her, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's gonna be her or who, because Nina is a very interesting character. She kind of screams Grandmaster vibes to me, but at the same time, I don't think we've seen her before, right? And then at the same time, she's definitely kind of important, right? There are many moments where it kind of it's like hinted or implied something is cooking, and then at the very last scene, you saw that's like very clearly, extremely clearly, like something's up. Yeah, but what? You know, I thought we'll see a little bit more of her, but no. So I'm expecting a lot more Nina. Yeah. And next is the 72 Devils. Right, we have the 72 Devils that originally came with the 5 new devils, implying that there's 4 other person like Van, I assume, or things or entities like Van where they are vessels. Okay, so talking about this point brings up the point that I wanted to bring up just now, which I think what Van thinks is that his existence is kind of, what's the right word? Like he's kind of planted, maybe he feels this way, he's planted into the world. Like he shouldn't exist. He's like, he's there so that he can have the devil in him, like have this connection. And so his very existence is that. But it's very unclear to me. Right? For Van's case, it's very unclear. So I think we need more answers. We need to know more about this thing. And yeah, talking about that also, the demon situation, right? Like what's going on with the demon situation. The Grendel. So yeah, like Grendel, is Grendel tied to the demon? Or can anyone just transform? Doesn't seem to be the case, you know. and then yet in the last fight, the Grendel and the demon is separate entities, and Grendel is always named, right? Grendel and Van, right? Like, it seems like there's 3 entities in Van, and that's a little bit confusing, concerning, however you want to put it. Yeah. Of course, there's also Mare, the situation with Mare. I think there's a lot of speculation, and for me, Mare probably has something to do with the Guardians of the Septarians, right? Because those are the ones that usually are able to, as otherworldly beings, that are able to talk about censored words that nobody else can decipher. Yeah, so I do think this phenomenon is not the first time we see it, and that's why I do think Mare is gonna come into play again, and we'll see more of her. Whether it's a holy beast, whether she's don't know what is she, right? We'll see more of her, I'm sure, and we need these answers. So next is, what does McBurn come into this, right? Because I think McBurn and Van suddenly has so much more in connection, right? After finding out about this demon in him, it feels very much like McBurn, right? Like, in the sense that similar but different, right? McBurn feels like it's 2 different entities fused into one. Van feels like a lot of 2 different entities fused into one, and McBurn just feels like he's having a human form with a demon's body in the world, right? So something's cooking, and I think if they ever interact, well, I'm sure Van knows McBurn, right? Yeah, then it would be very interesting. Yeah, after the events of February, for sure. So I mean, we see Gramhart and GM's Grandmaster's Promise coming into play for the final dungeon, and it's actually publicly acknowledged by Oathbreaker, right? Oathbreaker, like during the final scene when Gramhart tells Elroy to not interfere, and he's like, yeah, we know. It's interesting, he doesn't break his oath. Yeah, so I think there's some real stakes here, like, it's very interesting. Of course, the 8th Genesis, what's going on? Actually, I expected them to get all 8 within this game, because every single chapter without fail always had a Genesis. I'm so sorry, my mom came in. Yeah, so sorry, let me repeat this section. So every chapter always came with 1 new character and 1 new Genesis. So I thought for sure this time we're gonna see all 8, but I think intermission broke that flow. We had 2 new characters, or 1 new character, but no Genesis. Yeah, so that's where it broke the flow, and now we have 7 Genesis instead of 8, which is kind of interesting. How come there's 1 left? Is that 1 different somehow? Yeah, I don't think so, and there's still the mystery of the transformation, right? So yeah, there's that. And then Gramhart's plans, we haven't really seen much of his plans, like what's he working on. I mean, yeah, we see the new military mind, the assault frames and all that, but no, it's not in a way, it's nothing new to us, right, viewers, when we know about it from Erebonia. They're also building their own, right? So not exactly a shock. And then yeah, one point I wanted to bring out is, what's the canonical ending for the villains? Because there's so many decision trees, right? Like, you gotta make, you got to decide whether or not they die or they survive, and does any of them matter? So is there like one fixed route, or is it that we'll never see them ever again? So it doesn't matter what decision you ever make. So yeah, that's one more concern. It'll be cool if that decision made in Daybreak actually affects Daybreak 2 in a carryover way. That'll be, wow, that'll be a mammoth task, but if they can do it, that'll be very interesting. And then Van and Elaine, of course, love to see more of their relationship, and I really hope there's some progress here, the whole time, man. Like it feels like there's little to no progress in Daybreak, and I hope there's some advancements that we'll see in Daybreak too, because frankly I want to see their relationship not just come together, but thereafter as well, like Estelle and Joshua. And I think the writing for them is on a class of its own, so I really look forward to seeing them. Yeah, so with that, I have come to the end of my sharing. This went on for way longer than I thought, and if you have listened up to this point, I cannot thank you enough. This video had gone on forever, and I frankly don't expect anyone to listen all the way through, especially because I think it's flawed. The video is not particularly interesting. I'm a no name, I don't do trails content per se, and yeah, I don't expect this to be a very well edited video as well. That said, this is my first time recording a video with my voice for YouTube, and I probably wouldn't have done that if not for a series I dearly love. I won't ask you to subscribe, as this channel is meant for me to experiment and do different things that I enjoy, and that's not necessarily trails content like this video. That said, thank you for watching and your kind support. I really look forward to your how do you find the game, right? Your comments down below, and I love to interact and kind of listen to your perspectives, so please share them with me as well. With that out of the way, thank you. So see you next time, maybe.